This afternoon, we are exploring a new monthly theme, as it is May 4th. For those of you who are a little nerdy like me, May the 4th be with you. Happy Star Wars Day. Which fits in perfectly, actually, with our new theme, which is living liberating love through the practice of imagination. And imagination is quite a topic, and there are many, many ways to approach it. So today, we're just going to scratch the surface and talk about what is imagination and how might it show up for us, particularly the ways in which it shows up in our relationships with one another. So I have both a story this morning and a little improv activity that I'm going to invite you all to join me in. And we'll see how it goes. We might try and do another one later in the service or not. We'll see how everybody's doing with it. But let's start with a story. And this is a story based on a Thai family called Drawn Together by Min Lee and Dan Santat. It doesn't have a lot of words, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the pictures and invite your imagination into this story. We see a little boy being dropped off by a parent. There he goes. Whose house would we guess that is? Probably a grandfather. He's not looking very thrilled about this turn of events. Let's see what happens next. Oh, they're having lunch, but their foods look very different from each other. The child says, "So, what's new, Grandpa?" And the grandfather responds in Thai, which he doesn't understand, and I can't read, but there's a translation in the beginning of the book, and that the grandfather is asking, "What's new with you?" They're asking the same question, but they can't understand each other. Maybe a little TV. The character speaking in Thai is saying, "Dragon." And the child says, "Can we watch something else?" The grandfather is saying, "Do you want to watch something else?" But they're missing each other because they speak a different language. The boy decides, "I can't understand. I'm just going to go do something else." What does he pull out of his bag? Colors and paper. He's got a character there, it looks like. His imagining of himself with a wand. Oh, now Grandpa's got an idea. He has a paper sketchbook as well. And a pen that looks a little different. Right when I gave up on talking, my grandfather surprised me by revealing a world beyond words. And in a flash, we see each other for the first time. All the things we could never say come pouring out. And we build a new world that even words can't describe. But just when we're closer than ever, that old distance comes roaring back. This time, I'm not afraid. Because I know that together we can make our way across. Now, after years of searching for the right words, we find ourselves happily speechless. What are they taking home and leaving behind? Yeah, they've switched writing implements. The magic wand and the pen sword have been exchanged. The end. This morning I have a brief meditation as part of our Joys and Sorrows times. It's called We Imagine a Path by D. Scott Cooper. We bow our heads in order to imagine not one path, but many. We imagine a path forward for those who cannot imagine any path forward. Because of poor health, financial hardship, family crisis, and other roadblocks, we cannot begin to understand or imagine. We struggle to imagine a path forward for those who are forced to leave a homeland against their will, and for those unable to leave a war-torn homeland despite their lives being in danger. We imagine a path forward for those who leave their homes to make a better life for their families elsewhere. May we be a welcoming presence along that path toward hope. We come together to imagine a path forward for those of us despairing because we do not seem to know our country nor our neighbors, despite the fact that we have not moved at all. May we be the good we are hoping to find as we travel side by side down the path toward hope. We imagine a path forward for those who feel lonely. May we take one another's hands as we walk that path toward community. Truly, we know as we imagine these ways forward and take one another's hands, the paths will lead to hope. The roads will lead to beloved community, and the arc will bend toward justice because we have dared to travel with love in our hearts. I invite us now into a time of musical meditation. Imagination. I think imagination is interesting because it can take a few different forms. Some of us have vibrant imaginations and think of things that are fantastical and wild, and new and unknown. Others of us have a little bit more practical imaginations. I think sometimes I fall on this side, and my spouse falls on the other side, of thinking about new ways of doing things and trying to piece out what could really happen in a situation and what that looks like, and going through all the details. Some of us have imaginations that are slow and thoughtful. And others of us have imaginations that bounce all over the place and can barely be contained, or often can't be contained, and don't always make a lot of sense but are a lot of fun. An imagination isn't something that just happens and you either have it or you don't, but imagination is actually something that we can grow and practice and engage with. And it changes depending on what we're exposed to. As I mentioned, I'm a little bit of a nerd, and there's Star Wars and Star Trek, and I could spend a whole series of sermons talking about those and the ways they've sparked my imagination. But I want to touch on a different one this morning, because recently we watched season 3? I don't remember now, of Wheel of Time, originally a book series written by Robert Jordan. And this was an interesting one to me because I have read all of the books long before they started turning it into a TV series. And I noticed the difference in my imagination when I was reading the books versus when I'm watching the series. When I read the books, my imagination isn't very clear. There's a lot of space for possibilities, and my imagining is emotional. I focus on what the emotional experience is of each of the characters and how they might be present in those moments that are being described. But when I watch the TV series, my imagination is more visual. How are these different pieces appearing on the screen? What's happening in these storylines? It makes me wonder about the ways in which we interact with the world and how it impacts our imagination. And vice versa. How does our imagination impact the ways we interact with the world? These days, it's easy to imagine doom scenarios, right? Imagine the worst of what could happen. But I wonder if that's really a helpful way for us to focus our imaginations. Does that live out our values? I think there's a difference, a fine line between imagining the worst that could happen to us versus imagining how the things that are happening might hurt others, to the point and the purpose of figuring out how we can help, to having empathy and understanding through our imaginations. I want to read a quote from Adrienne Maree Brown from her book Emergent Strategy, where she talks about imagination. And she talks about it from the Black perspective, and it's a little intense, so take a deep breath. She says, "We are in an imagination battle. Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and Renisha McBride and so many others are dead because in some white imagination, they were dangerous. And that imagination is so respected that those who kill based on an imagined, racialized fear of Black people are rarely held accountable. Imagination has people thinking they can go from being poor to a millionaire as part of a shared American dream. Imagination turns brown bombers into terrorists and white bombers into mentally ill victims. Imagination gives us borders, gives us superiority, gives us race as an indicator of ability. I often feel I am trapped inside someone else's capability. I often feel I am trapped inside someone else's imagination, and I must engage my own imagination in order to break free. Adrienne Maree Brown, Emergent Strategies. How are we, as Unitarian Universalists, as a people of faith in this religion, practicing imagination in ways that help us break free? We are in a time and in a society where our imaginations there's an attempt to control them, right? An attempt to limit the way we can see the world. We see this on the attack on diversity, inclusion, there we go, and equity, right? There's this idea of limiting our ability to use language to describe experiences. The attempted erasure of transgender, right? Of the pluralism that we as Unitarian Universalists hold as one of our core values. When we limit language, we limit imagination, or there's an attempt to limit imagination. We saw that in the book this morning, right? This inability to communicate means we have to find other ways of connecting with each other, other ways of imagining new worlds. So as we explore this month, I want you to pay attention to your imagination. What messages are you telling yourself about what's possible in the world? How are you imagining love showing up? How is your imagination impacted by centering our core value of love?